People who have called CPS or the police on a friend, what made you do it? Serious? U/PM_ME_tiny_dinosaurs responded. Wasn't a friend, was a neighbor. When I came home at 2:30 a.m. to see my neighbor's two little kids asleep in the hallway. I asked them what was up and they said their mom had told them to go play at the park, but now wasn't answering. I knocked really hard on their door, but no one answered. So I called the police. To be honest, I was worried about the mother. I thought she may have had a medical emergency or something and was unconscious. Nope. When the police opened the door, the mother is just gone. All the stuff was gone too. Luckily the kids had an aunt who took them in, and last I heard they were doing great. U/not where the wind blows responded. I called CPS on my best friend because her fights with her boyfriend were so out of hand. They were violent and aggressive and lasted for hours and hours while their infant son sat in the corner crying. The breaking point was when the friend's brother called me freaking out because he'd shown up at the house, and they were so enmeshed in the fight that they didn't even notice he'd arrived. The mom was throwing whatever was in distance at her boyfriend. The brother took the baby and left, and they didn't even notice. At the time, I was working for CPS, so there's literally no possible way I couldn't report the shit that was going on. It was a brutal situation to be in. U/Katie87 responded. I called on my sister-in-law. She's had a meth addiction for many years and got pregnant by a guy she got it from. She was 23 or so and he was 50 or so. She pretty much stayed home her entire pregnancy. I think she legit was trying to make it work, but the same day her daughter was born I went to see her, and the baby was being held by another guy I know she got meth from. Fast forward a month. She starts disappearing with the baby for days. Every time we would see her, the baby was terrified of people, not gaining weight, and had a bald spot on the back of her head from basically living in her car seat. So Elle called. The baby has been living with me ever since. I have legal guardianship over her, and we just celebrated her 4th birthday last weekend. We invited her mom. She left early and we found her car parked at a dealer's house. Fuck her. U/Wanderlust-stricken responded. My mom used to do daycare from our house. There was a 4-year-old whose parents were separated. When he was with his dad he would be dropped off clean and dressed, but when his mom dropped him off he was in PJs and hadn't eaten. One day in the dead of winter she dropped him off without a jacket. We had to roll up the sleeves on one of mine so he wouldn't freeze. I started noticing bruises, but kids sometimes play rough. One day he had a particularly bad one and I asked about it. He told me Chris, his mom's boyfriend, had gotten angry. After prodding a bit more I found out that Chris had pushed him down the front steps. I asked if Chris ever hits him and he shyly told me yes. I informed his mother when she picked him up that evening and she told me he made it up and had just slipped and fallen down the steps. It was an obvious lie. My mom called CPS and they investigated. It turns out that Chris had a history of violence. The boy's father was given full custody. Shortly later Chris went to jail for something and the mom won back partial custody. The boy is a lot older now and actually just stopped by my mom's house last month to thank her for teaching him how to read, because it's one of his favorite things now. She says he seems to be doing really well. U/Alex Penname responded. Half my extended family called CPS on the other half. I have a side of the family that's full of money, drugs, and felons. A lot of those felons have kids. We've called for child abuse and elder abuse, but only the child abuse half came to anything that I'm aware of. The social worker drove down to the property and found the twin 2-year-old boys wandering in the middle of the road. There was a lake on the property and he'd already been there once because the kids were unsupervised. Just took them with him when he left. I've also had to call in reports due to my job. I'm a mandated reporter and I'm regularly in elementary schools. U/Estoy probable Pupin responded. I'm a nanny and therefore I am considered a mandatory reporter. Thankfully the only time I have had to exercise that was for a family I picked up a one-time job with. The 5-month-old baby was drinking from bottles that were never washed and left with rotten formula inside until they were dumped and immediately refilled. He also had no muscle definition whatsoever in his neck, arms, or legs. Obviously babies don't have much, but he should have been able to hold his head up, sit up for brief moments if not longer, and he practicing standing up while someone is holding his hands and supporting him. Most do this by practicing in a parent's lap. His head was flat as a board because the baby was literally never picked up, or given tummy time, interacted with. They would put him in a swing, hand him his gross old bottle for him to try to feed himself from, turn on the TV to something colorful, and ignore him until he was screaming from hunger the next time. They also had a 2-year-old who was visibly afraid to talk or call attention to herself, and a 5-year-old with severe and violent ADHD. He would beat the crap out of the 2-year-old, leading to her desire to be unnoticed. So yeah. I called on them. /deleted responded. I live in India, and once my mother called the police on a neighbor, who was severely abusive to his wife and 2 children. He would drag his wife out by her hair, kick and beat her in front of us. He'd beat his kids, 10F and 7M, black and blue, and did not even bother covering it up. My mother called the police on him the first time she saw it going down. The CL came after 45 minutes, by then he was done beating her. After he saw the wife's bruises, he beat the man and then warned him. That was it. He did not do anything. The older girl had a severely bruised lip, very clearly visible, and he still didn't do anything, despite my mother's insistence. The man gave his wife and the poor kids another beating for calling the cops on him. We have no CPS in India, and my mother had to contact an NGO to get help. The woman was very reluctant to accept the help or file a complaint, understandably. The abuse went on for another 2 to 2.5 years until the court case concluded. All this shows how mandatory CPS is. The present system is too time-consuming. /deleted responded. I called and reported my cousin twice. The first time, because she posted about how she used the power of nature, and also prayer was somehow involved, to cure her son's rash. How? By leaving her baby, too young to walk, outside on the lawn until his skin burned and peeled off. CPS told me that they could only take reports from people living in the same state, and since my only evidence was the Facebook posts she made with before and after photos, they would not be opening an investigation. The second time, her children caught that sickness going around that happened the same time as the Ebola scare. Basically, kids were getting lung infections and not breathing. She again posted to Facebook about her kids getting sick, and claimed she was treating them with probiotics. To clarify, her children were blue from lack of oxygen, and she was feeding them yogurt. I didn't call CPS that time, I called my cousin's neighbor. The neighbor checked Facebook, saw the photos of the kids, and stormed over there. She told my cousin that if she didn't take those kids to the ER, then she, neighbor, was going to kidnap them and do it herself. The hospital called CPS, because the infection had progressed to the point that all 3 boys have permanent damage to their lungs. Cousin told CPS that it's her religious right to refuse medical treatment for herself or her children, and CPS agreed. The case was closed. I unfriended her on Facebook because I can't watch someone slowly kill their children. /batshit crazy responded. I have twice. The first time, my nieces and nephew were living in knee-high garbage throughout the house. They had no working stove, refrigerator, or shower. They lived in another town, and we didn't get to visit often, and when we did, their dad would meet us at a restaurant or park. Made a surprise visit when I was in that town one day. No one answered the door, but I could see the mess through the window and smell it through the door. My brother-in-law just handed them over. He ignored them for 6 years after. The second time, I was working as a children's minister counselor. An 11-year-old girl came to my office for counseling. She was pregnant. Turns out her mom's boyfriend raped her. Her mother defended the boyfriend, but he turned out to be in the States illegally. The mother convinced the girl to have the baby. Their baby was born early and had some abnormalities. The child was eventually removed from their home because she was severely malnourished. She was hospitalized and placed in the state's care, and ended up dying. None of these people were charged with shit. The mother of puppies responded. I called CPS on my uncle after my cousin, 5, called and told me her mom had beat her because she made a mess trying to make food in the middle of the night. After she said it, you could hear both my uncle and his girlfriend screaming at her to shut up and telling her she was going to get taken away and put with strangers if she told people. Including me, they have had 7 people call and report them for child abuse. I'm waiting to see if I can take her if she ends up being removed from the home. /Needco responded. My husband and I tipped off his best friend's employer that he was a self-proclaimed boy lover. And the employer called the police. We were on the other side of the country at the time, and he was working with at-risk youth. He felt his attraction to the kids made him connect with them on a deeper level, but he admitted to being unsure what would happen if one of them tried to initiate anything physical. There were years of message board posts, which were deleted within 24 hours of him being confronted, but his boss had already printed them off, showing a drastically changing attitude and admitting to things like having the boys sleep in his bed and taking them swimming and watching them get changed. When the whole thing came out, we basically lost our friend group. The guy in question spun the story to make it seem like a completely different issue. Not enough evidence was found to arrest him. He left the country with his girlfriend. They have since married and divorced. A few years later, we got a call saying the case was reopened and asking if we had any contact with him or new information, but I have no idea what happened. It messed up my husband a lot. Took him years to trust people again. We have kids now and we are really protective, they do normal kid stuff, but very few adults have any sort of alone time with them at all. The guy from to 3 responded. My cousin and her 5-year-old daughter stayed with me for a little while. She was often verbally abusive and neglected basic parenting responsibilities. One night I was really irritated that the 2 of them hadn't come home yet. It was 9 p.m. and I knew LD need to help her daughter with her homework, probably feed her dinner, and get her ready for bed. I did all these things because, like I said, my cousin sucks. When they finally got home, the little girl ran right up to me and screams. We were late because the line at the store was long. Children are horrible liars. The following morning I was taking her to school and prodded a little because something was obviously up. Come to find out the poor girl was left in the car the day before while my cousin was in the mall shopping for toys. Not toys for her daughter, but toys for her grown-ass boyfriend who was in his 40s. She told me she was scared and that she was in the car for so long that she fell asleep when the sun was out and woke up when it was dark. I dropped her off at the school and spent a good 20 minutes on the parking lot trying to stop myself from shaking so violently so that I could pick up my phone and make the call. As it turned out, the school had already made calls to CPS in the past and a case had already been open on my cousin. Stevie responded. She was staying with me, as she'd been evicted. I saw her scream and slap the kid, but the final straw came when she threw him. She was mad at him, as parents are sometimes, but she picked him up and threw him on the bed. The kid was about 25 months old. The way he landed, and with such force, she nearly broke his neck. He almost bounced and hit the wall. I called my dad's wife for advice, since she is a preschool teacher. She said that by telling her this info, the law states she has to report it. Educators are required to report potential abuse and neglect. She advised I call since it would be a first-person account, rather than third-person from her. It turns out, this wasn't the first time she'd been called on. The kid's dad called because she was giving the kid whiskey to get him to sleep when he had his teeth come in. She got a warning that time. This time, however, she got the kid taken away. I kicked her out before then, but found out through the dad. I know she loved her son very much. I never doubted her devotion. But she had anger issues, and also grew up in a family that thought belting your kid was a-okay. She said I didn't understand, since I wasn't a parent. Yeah, I don't understand it all, but I sure as hell know you don't fucking slap your toddler in the face when he cries. She assumed I was a hands-off person, who thinks spanking is evil. No, a swat on the butt is fine, but full-on abuse, under my roof, was not gonna fly. I lost a very long friendship, but I would do it all over again. Don't regret a thing. Deleted responded. When I was in elementary school, we had a neighbor, who had 3 girls and 1 boy. The boy was given preferential treatment. The girls were chained to the kitchen table when they were home. The older girl had a crush on me and would attempt to fight and scratch me. One day, the girl and I got into a fight on the playground. We were taken to the principal's office. I vaguely remember, but I'm sure I told the school staff she was abused at home. I remember the cops being called and them questioning me, however, I don't remember the questions. The girl had several examinations physically and mentally. There were wounds on the bottom of her feet. The parents of the girl would claim that the carpet had become damaged and rolled back, revealing the carpet tacks. The girl was not cautious and stepped on them. When in true, the parents would punish the girls, but sticking needles into the sole of their feet. I remember this very vividly. The girl was also sexually abused with a broomstick handle, I was told. The older girl went to a foster home. The 2 other girls and the boys stayed with the parents. Not sure how that worked out. Sold myself for hair dye responded. A girl I knew in middle and high school had a lot of problems. She told me her mom and stepdad punished her by taking away her food, locked her in her room overnight, and monitored all of her phone calls. It made me so uncomfortable that I ended up calling the police anonymously, and CPS lodged an investigation. Turned out she wasn't being abused. She was just mentally ill, had a personality disorder, and developed a compulsive lying habit. The investigation ended with her being put into a special school for kids with emotional problems. For a few years she was getting extremely intense therapy, and was doing really well. Then she turned 18, stopped going to therapy, stopped taking her medication, and ended up even worse off. I tried to help her, but the friendship ended when she sexually assaulted me. _this_awkward responded. I just did it. It sucked. I don't have that friend anymore. But I did the right thing. He was 20, definitely not ready for a kid. She had dissociative personality disorder, and was off of her meds. She'd dip whenever she felt like it, doing who knows what. He begged me for help, so I filed the report. Then he kicked her out. That lasted 4 days. She managed to guilt him back into his house. He thought that was something that should have been hidden from me. So he didn't tell me. Which is what pissed me off and why we are no longer friends. Sucks. But I hope that kid gets taken far, far away, and the mom gets some major fucking help because she's an awful person. You/deleted responded. When I was a kid I had my first sleepover at my best friend's house. There were rumors that his dad was a drinker, which meant my parents had been reluctant to let me sleep over for a long time, but his mom reassured my parents that they were just rumors. So after school we go over and we play, have dinner, everything is fine. His dad had a couple of beers with dinner, but that's not surprising. In the middle of the night, we were woken up by shouting and banging. His parents were fighting. Badly. Swearing, things being thrown. My friend looked so embarrassed and upset that I was hearing this. We then heard a scream, a crash, and it went quiet. That was the scariest moment of all. I quietly left the room and looked down the stairs from the landing. My friend's mom was laying still. She'd been thrown into the internal door, or more precisely, through the closed internal door. I went back to the bedroom. My friend had a phone in his room, so I called my mom, crying, saying that his mom was lying on the floor and not moving. Within minutes the police arrived, and a few minutes after that my mom and dad arrived and took us away. I had to give statements and such the next day. His mom was fine. She was bruised, had cuts, she'd been knocked out cold when she went through the door, but she was fine. His dad went to prison and his mom remarried later, to a really nice guy. I guess it all worked out, but it was a horrific experience to live through. You/Reddit throwaway anon responded. My friend and former neighbor is an alcoholic with a little girl. One day a couple years ago, some random guy called me to come and get her because she was passed out on the sidewalk with her daughter in the stroller. I didn't call the police that time, but someone must have, because they showed up. My husband and I ended up fostering the child for a few days. She soon got her daughter back, but less than even a week later, her friend called me to come and pick them up, because they were in some guy's house and my friend was passed out drunk and her daughter was scared. I couldn't get her to tell me where they were, so I called CPS, and they called the police. It turned out they were at the house of the guy who had called me the first time, and apparently he was a sex offender, but not to children, as far as I understand, thank goodness. She has cut me off mostly, and I'm having enough of my own problems currently, but I hope she's managed to kick the habit, and that her daughter is safer now. You/Putagatito responded. She was only supposed to stay with us a couple days. She started demanding a house key, bed, etc., all without paying rent. We were willing to overlook this, as she got a job, and could probably find a place soon. Now CPS had already taken away her kid, because she lived with her druggy dad, but now she was with us she could see him. The entire time, she had her 3-year-old child, all she fucking did was yell at him and tell him what he couldn't do. If he wasn't sitting quietly doing nothing she was yelling. Our son is a wee younger than him, and didn't understand why he couldn't play. Then we found out she was doing a ton of drugs in her room with the kid. We called CPS and the father, and had a cop assist in removing her from our home, which was completely legal, because she never paid rent. Bonus. Her and her friends threatened to kill me, and one got sent to jail for a direct threat. Fun times. Moral of the story, don't help anyone ever because they probably do drugs. You/Kitty Smitten 4865 responded. I was in an outpatient group therapy program for severe depression. One woman in my group got kicked out for not reporting suicidal thoughts during morning check-in. Yes, this is a thing that happens. When she said goodbye I gave her my number. She called me to talk a few times, and we eventually made plans to go for a walk around this lake. I got there and she never showed, and she didn't answer when I called. This woman was so depressed while we were in group together that she was nearly catatonic at times. I knew something was up. I called other mutual friends from group, and no one knew how else to get a hold of her. I finally called the police to do a wellness check. I didn't have any information about her except her first name, no last name, no address, nothing. I think police were able to locate her by contacting the therapy center, but I'm not sure. The police couldn't give me any information, but her daughter called me a few days later. She had attempted suicide, but police found her in time, and she was going to be okay. When she didn't show and I first started to worry, remember wondering if I was blowing this whole thing out of proportion. Like the cops were going to knock on her door, and she would answer perfectly fine, and everyone would think I was an idiot for getting police involved. But I knew that being embarrassed for going overboard was better than the guilt LD feel if I thought something was wrong and did nothing. If I hadn't called, she would have died. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. Please like and subscribe for more videos like this one.